Hi there everyone, welcome to another Keep Greek video. Here I am, as you can see, right up against my microphone. I'm not in a studio like some fancy YouTubers are. I'm just out in my office here, and I'm in Zambia, and there's a lot of noise outside around me, which is why I have to get really close up to my microphone to give you good audio. We're here doing Keep Greek videos, and we're syntax diagramming the New Testament so that we can get to understand it better in English. We're working with the Greek text so that we can actually see how the English is built upon and related to the English. So please join us. Welcome. You're really welcome. Welcome here. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, hope you enjoy these videos. Please do subscribe if you like this kind of content, and please to make some comments and let me know what passages of the New Testament you'd like us to syntax diagram next. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and hope you're blessed as much as I am by doing these videos. We've got Colossians chapter 1 open in front of us. We've been working through this together already in our last few videos, and if you joined us, you'll remember how we saw that the first real sentence started in verse 3 with this main verb, which is indented here as far to the left as possible. All the other clauses and phrases which follow it are indented slightly to the right, depending on how they relate to the clauses which came before. We also noticed down the verse, that sentence ended at verse number 8, and then we continued in our second video from verse number 9. Now I want you to notice that here this sentence starts slightly indented away from the left margin, and I've done that deliberately because of this phrase here. Because of this is actually what that means. Really what that is saying is because of what has preceded, what follows is going to be important. And so that's why I've indented it here to show that the main verb is still up here, the first verb of the first sentence, and this one is supporting that whole idea. So this sentence which follows in our syntax diagram starts off with this main verb here. Remember, this finite verb is preceded by a relative pronoun, which is why it is indented, and it's really not the main idea being communicated. The main idea is this one. That's why it's indented more to the left. Anyhow, so let's not get stuck into what happened last time, just doing some review and showing you how our syntax diagram, we continued working through the sentence, and we recognized in Greek that the sentence just keeps on going and going and going. We haven't found the end of the sentence. Actually, we're going to do that today. Today we're starting from verse 17, because last video we ended off at the end of verse number 16. All right, so this week we're going to continue on from verse 17, and you can see I've already done the syntax diagramming all the way to the end of verse 23, which is where the sentence ends. That is where the full stop is, and that's where we're going to take this video through today. So join me as we syntax diagram the rest of this. I'm going to be working in the English. I'm going to show you first of all the Greek, and then we're going to go on to the English. I want to actually do the syntax diagramming in English, and we're going to use the ESV translation for reference, and I'm going to syntax diagram the English based on the Greek, and I think that's going to be a super exciting exercise. Let me know if you're going to be enjoying this as well. Cool, let's get stuck in. All right, so I've got the Greek New Testament on top and the ESV at the bottom. And at this stage, what we're going to be doing is just identifying all the verbs. I've put them in different colors. The finite verbs are in bold and red. The infinitives are just in red. And the participles are in red and italics. You'll see some blue verbs there. Those are subjunctive verbs. We'll talk more about them later. All right, here we're going to just work with the Greek text for a moment. And let me just quickly syntax this quickly, and then I will talk about why I made these decisions in the Greek text, and then we'll flip over to the English and get the English to be syntaxed according to this syntax diagram, which we've just created here. All right, the first thing that I want us to notice is why we've got this indented all the way to here at verse 17. And it all has to do with this demonstrative pronoun here, this This one is really what that is translated to say. This one. That's why I've got the arrow pointing upwards, because we ask ourselves the question, which is the this one? And that takes us back to our previous syntaxing, which we did in our last video. And it really all started here with this verb here, giving thanks to the Father, the one who made us sufficient, and then also who rescued us and who transferred us into the kingdom of his Son. That's, of course, now we have a new person involved here, no longer the Father, but the Son, because the next one, these next lines are syntaxed a little bit further indented to indicate that the Son is being described, the beloved of him, his beloved, in whom there's another relative pronoun there, in whom we have redemption, and who is the image of God. And then he is described further as the firstborn, and because all things were created by him. That's really what that's going on. And then this new sentence here is what we've just come to right now in verse 17. And this one is before all things, is really what we're going to say here. And that's why we've syntaxed this with this big indent here, because we want to indicate that this demonstrative is describing this Son. That's why it is indented underneath that phrase there, so that this one can be seen to be modifying this Son here. All right, let's just quickly syntax the English as well. We're syntaxing the ESV version, and we're doing it exactly according to the syntax we just created from the Greek. All right, so now we should have a copy of the Greek and English identical syntax diagrams, and we can compare them side by side as we work through them. An important thing for us to notice right now is how the English and the Greek are both perfectly aligned. Each verb is on a similar line. The syntax is the same. It's identical, and that's because the English is based on the Greek. We're going to work through the English now, and we're going to see how that the English syntax rules or the English grammar rules don't necessarily apply here, and that's because we're basing our decisions on the Greek grammar. This is going to help us to understand as English readers what some of the emphases are in the Greek. All right, we've got the ESV open in front of us. I have already done the syntax diagramming, as you can see here in front of me. And we've got from verses 17 all the way through to verse 23, which ends at the first full stop, which we find in the Greek. This is the first full stop over here. However, you can see in English, there is a couple of full stops along the way. And we'll discover why they're there. English loves to shorten sentences. Great. So let's see. And we already said that this he is referring to the Son. And if we slip over to the Greek here, we can see actually this is the demonstrative pronoun he. He referring back to the Son. And so that's how we took our lead here. This is actually a demonstrative, so it's referring back to there. And therefore, Greek hasn't actually put a full stop in yet, because it's still part of the same idea that is being built. He is. The and is there as well, so we could make it a small letter. Right, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So there's two things, there's two finite verbs that are going on here. This is a proposition that is claiming two things. He is, first of all, before all things, and secondly, all things hold together in him. Then we have again this another demonstrative, going back to the Greek, we'll see there is a demonstrative here and a demonstrative here, and this one. Okay, so these two relative pronouns are referring back to the Son, and we got these two demonstratives relating back to the Son. Back in English here, this is a demonstrative and a demonstrative, and then this double underlined one is indicating that this is a relative pronoun. So the relative pronoun in Greek keeps it in the same sentence, which is why there's no full stop. This punctuation here is not a full stop. This is like a semicolon. It's a break in the sentence, but it's not a new sentence. And that's why I think English put in a full stop right over there. I think English also has used a new sentence right over here where we've got a similar punctuation as well. Let's have a look. 14. Yeah, there we go. From 15. Yeah, there we go. End of 14. There is a new sentence that English is creating. Here's the image where you can see this actually, we said, is a relative pronoun. So the Son is being described here in verse 17. He is before all things, in him all things hold together, and he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning. In other words, because it's a relative pronoun, we say who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. So now we're describing the Son. Yeah, he is the beginning. He is the firstborn from the dead. Why? In order that, so this is where the subjunctive verbs come in. This subjunctive indicates a sense of purpose, especially when combined with the hina clause. See, in the Greek here, we've got hina. In order that he may be. Not that he is, although he is, we know he is, but the purpose for him being the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, is that he may be. This is a purpose statement. He may be in all things the first. He may be preeminent. He may be preeminent. That in everything he may be preeminent. This is beautiful. This is describing the Son. Now we got a hoti. Hoti is here. For or because. Now we got a reason for this. Why is this that he is preeminent? Because it could be why. Yeah, let's go and see how it is. For or because. In him. Now this is in him, this is a pronoun. It's not a relative pronoun. This is a pronoun. In him, who's this? In Jesus. Let's put an arrow up there because it's referring back again to the same antecedent. Yeah, here we go. The Son. In him, for in him was pleased. Now you can see here I have changed the order of the text. When I put in a asterisk here, it's to remind myself and ourselves as we read this that although I've preserved the ESV text, I have actually reordered this one. So this one actually fits in. Is this where it is? No, it's here. Okay, so I need to make a new indicator. So let's do that right now. This arrow indicates that it was moved from somewhere below. And it was moved from here. And so this arrow indicates that this is where it belongs in the English translation, ESVs. But I've moved it here to match the Greek. For in him was pleased all the fullness of God to dwell. Now we're just going to come across here and see. For in him he was pleased. So here you see Greek is able to encode into the verb, the finite verb. It encodes the information as to the person and number. Third person singular. He was pleased. He was pleased. So in him he was pleased, all the fullness to dwell. Now the reason why I put this like this, now we've got a problem here because in one sense this is not in the original. So I'm going to put that in italics. just so we can see that this actually has been implied in the translation. All the fullness to dwell. In him was pleased all the fullness of dwell. Now you see this translation, the ESV here has decided that the third person singular, the subject of this verb, is the fullness of God. So the fullness was pleased to dwell in him, is how the ESV is translating this. Like this is the subject of the sentence. And I'm not 100% sure that I think that's the right way to go with this. I'll tell you why. Because of the context. First of all, we have an infinitive verb here indicated by a red text that's not bold. And here's another infinitive. So we've got two infinitives, right? And these two infinitives are describing what was pleased, right? So let's go to the Greek. We can see here all the fullness. So he was pleased in him all the fullness to dwell. Let me put an arrow here so that it matches. I am going to argue that the third person singular of this verb is God. God the Father, who we read about up right over here. When we started this section of our syntax where we started describing God, who was sufficient and who rescued us and who transferred us into the kingdom of his Son. Now, at this moment, the author here, Paul, has taken a break from describing God and now has started describing the Son. And here he's described the Son all the way up until this point. Now, in fact, I believe that he is still describing the Son at this point, but it is God and the Son being described together, because I would argue that this should be God was pleased, or the Father was pleased, for all the fullness to dwell in him, and also through him to reconcile all things to himself. Let's see that in English. And let's this is obviously the ESV. I'm going to say that instead of this, we should say, for in him the Father was pleased all the fullness of God to dwell, or all the fullness to dwell. And through him, that's through the Son actually, to reconcile all things to himself. Now this is to God, all right? All things. God the Father, making peace by the blood of his cross. That's the Son's cross, whether on earth or in heaven. And now he breaks out here again. And you, this is, I would say this should be also you, even you. So you're part of the all things, right? Making peace by the blood of his cross through all things. Again, we've got this. This phrase has been moved to match the Greek. And it comes from here. Making peace by the blood of his cross, the Son's cross. So the Greek would read like this, and to reconcile all things, whether on earth, whether the things on earth or the things in heaven. So in the ESV translators have done a wonderful job to emphasize the fact that all things are the things whether on earth or the things whether on heaven. That's how it does in the original. Okay, so you've got the things. You can see the article there. All things, and then you've got whether the things. You can see that matches the things on earth or the things in the heavens. And then it goes on from here saying also you. So including you, even you amongst these things. Now I know you're not a thing, but even you were reconciled. Okay, all things were reconciled, but even you, also you, and you is what our ESV will translate. Let's just go back to ESV. You can see there we go, and you, and think about that as also you including all these things. But just a quick note here. This is where the ESV reads, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross, is where the ESV will put that phrase. Even you, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, you also were one of those who are reconciled. Reconciled by who? Reconciled by the Father, who was pleased to allow all the fullness to dwell in his Son. And the Father was pleased also to reconcile all things to himself, things on earth and things in heaven, and even you, by making peace on by the blood of his cross. You were reconciled. You who were once alienated. This is now in participle. You who were, in the original here we got you being alienated. There's two participles there. You once being alienated and enemies in the minds and the works of the evil that you were doing. Being, you see, that's why it's italicized here. It's a verbal idea, but it's not the main verb. It's a participle idea. You who are once being alienated, he has now reconciled. Now, I've got this in a wavy underline here because it is not in the original. Again, here we have a main verb preceded by a conjunction but or now, and that conjunction is what joins this sentence to what has come before, which is why we don't, it's not a sentence actually, this, because we got this conjunction, and not only is the conjunction, but also we got nuni, which agrees with this once. So, and you, let's go back to English, and you who once were alienated, and you he has reconciled. You can see how it is agreeing here. God has reconciled all things. And now here we've got he has reconciled. And here's something that I'm not sure we can. So the ESV has put in he has reconciled. What I want us to see actually is that the original says, instead of he has reconciled you, rather this verb is in the passive form. Reconciled, but it is you. You have been reconciled. Well, this is aorist passive. Aorist really meaning it is a past tense. It's some action which has been done in the past. And passive meaning it's action which is done to you. To you. So Greek is able to, in this ending here, encode into the verb that this is second person singular. So the subject actually is you. Let's go back here. So in English, you is the subject of this verb, which should be passive. You have been reconciled. Now, the ESV has implied that it is God who is reconciling, doing the action here, because if it's passively acting upon us, then the active side of it, they have said is he. Now I've just put he there, and I agree it would be, this he will have to come back to the Father because he was pleased to reconcile. However, this is implied. It's not actually in the text. But the ESV has done a great job of giving us the sense of what's going on. But you have been reconciled. This is the emphasis. You have been reconciled. The emphasis is on you. And now you, once alienated, are now reconciled. And this is a beautiful truth for us as believers. Once who were alienated and hostile are now reconciled. Wonderful. Man alive, I love this. Reconciled how? In his body of flesh, by his death. Again, we're going to the Son here, right? In order, why? Now, this is a infinitive. As you can see, it's not bold, but it is red. It's an infinitive, indicating purpose. It's a verb saying, in order to. He has reconciled you for what purpose? To present. To present. to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. And then we have a conditional marker here. If this is a conditional clause. If. So this purpose, in order to present you, is on the condition that if indeed you continue in the faith. If you continue in the faith. Stable and steadfast. Not shifting from the hope of the gospel. Which gospel? The gospel that you heard. We've had this before. Not shifting from the hope of the gospel. The hope of the gospel that you heard and which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a minister. Oh my word, this is beautiful, because this clause here, what we've got here, actually is something that we've had before. And this is how Paul started his letter. We've come to the end of Paul's second sentence. Paul's second sentence in Greek. And we can see that this is one entire sentence all the way, starting from verse 9. Starting from verse 9, where Paul started his ideas that we've not stopped praying for you since the day we heard something. They've not stopped praying and asking that you be filled with knowledge. So what is it that we've heard? Well, if we come to the bottom again, we've heard actually that you heard the gospel. And we know that because of Paul's first sentence going up to the top, all the way to the first sentence, where Paul started Colossians after his greeting, saying what? We thank God always, since we heard of what? Your faith and love that you have for all the saints, because of the hope laid up for you, which you heard. You heard how? You heard in the gospel, which has come to you. You've heard of the gospel, and now in the whole world, this gospel is bearing fruit and increasing since you heard it. Okay, so that's verse 6. As we've come down to the end of the second sentence, verse 23, we see this conditional sentence, this conditional clause here. If you continue in the faith. Now that faith is the very faith which Paul is thanking God for in the beginning. Right? Since we heard of your faith. We heard of your faith and love that you have because of the hope. There's a hope laid up for you in heaven. And this hope, which you've heard about, has caused you to have faith and love. Now, at the end of this sentence, Paul is saying, you can be presented holy and blameless above reproach before him if you continue in the faith. Continuing in the faith is crucial. We have to believe and continue to believe, being stable, not shifting. Don't shift from the hope of the gospel. There is hope in the gospel, and that hope is through Jesus Christ. Look at this. It is Jesus, the Son whom God loved and whom was sent. And that's how we have redemption. We have redemption. Look, let's come back down here. Because God was pleased to reconcile not only all things, but even you. He has reconciled through the body of flesh of the Son, through his death, through the death of Christ, in order to what? To present you holy, blameless, above reproach. All that's left for us to do is to believe. Continue to believe. This is not a once-off thing. We need to continue to believe. Being stable in our faith and steadfast in our faith. Not shifting from the hope. Keep on believing. Friends, keep on believing. Don't give up faith. Don't give up faith. This is a wonderful sentence. Thanks for sticking around with me for this syntax. I hope you're enjoying this syntax diagramming as much as I do. But as you can see here, this is one sentence, starting off with saying, I've heard of your hope. And this was the first sentence. We thank God because we've heard of your faith. And since we heard of that, we don't stop praying for you, praying that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will, so that you will be presented holy and blameless above reproach, because you need to continue in your faith. You need to continue in your faith, which was proclaimed. All right, friends, thanks for joining me. I'm going to cut this one here, and join me for the next video as we go and syntax the rest of chapter 1. Cool.